In my own experience, Romeo, whenever silver and gold to a large degree as well approaches a kind of a psychological barrier, it very often takes about 3 attempts on average to really break through and stay there. I think this is just a normal correction in a long-term bull market, as far as I'm
Okay.
concerned.
You have to really go back and look at the history. And I was in the business back when the Hunt brothers tried to corner the silver market in the 70s. And I think that's when it set the previous high of right around $49 and change. The Hunt brothers were in the futures market and they came crashing down when they learned the futures market can change the rules anytime they want, and tripled, quadrupled the margin they had to put up.
We've never had a precious metals bull market end or top out with silver sitting at an 80 or 90 to 1 ratio. It's never happened. I don't expect it will happen this time. So I think there's a lot of upside, and I'm very happy to see the pullback in a way, because it's very difficult. We have a mining business we're running, and it's very difficult to manage day to day when the price is moving up $1 a day and things are changing so quickly.
So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're logging in from today. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Bob Archer, CEO of Pinnacle Silver and Gold, Kit Mars, CEO of Alaska Silver, and David Stein, CEO of Kuya Silver, to discuss recent moves in the silver price and how all their projects fit in. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Very good.
Awesome. So today is obviously an interesting day to have this discussion, as there do appear to have been a correction in the silver price, bringing us all the way back to the silver price of what looks like 10 days ago so far. For all the sky is falling you see on Twitter, it's a good reminder. Before I get into questions, I'm going to do a couple of pieces of little housekeeping. One is today is an interactive event, so there is a chat button in the bottom right of the screen. You can access it anytime and ask questions to our speakers during today's event. If the conversation allows for it, and if those questions fit, I'll try and weave them in. Otherwise, I'll try and tackle them towards the end. We'll be avoiding, for the most part, questions about individual securities today, which doesn't mean you can't put them into the chat. It just means that I'll probably be sending them to the team afterwards rather than tackling them today. So feel free to load them in. It's just possible that you'll get an email from the participating companies afterwards rather than tackle during today's event. But if it's on topic and in the conversation, I would love to include those chat questions today. Today's event is also being recorded, and the replay will be available likely at about 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, so very shortly after the event ends. It'll pop in the exact same URL, but it'll also be available on SIX's YouTube page. I really appreciate if you wanted to share that once the conversation's through. If you enjoyed it, please do feel free to share it with your friends. But let me get right into the protein of today's conversation. And Bob, I'll start with you on this first one. Silver, while we were discussing this event and putting it together, it broke past $50 for a while. Now it's broken back below that kind of psychological barrier today. So I'm curious, what are your initial thoughts on the current silver price? Do you see today's correction fitting into a broader bull case? Do you think this is the beginning of a broader correction? And what's your outlook on silver through to the rest of this year?
In my own experience, Romeo, whenever silver and gold to a large degree as well approaches a kind of a psychological barrier, it very often takes about 3 attempts on average to really break through and stay there. And so when silver approached $50 last week and gold was approaching 4,000, was it last week? No, 2 weeks ago. Sorry. I was watching that very carefully and fully expecting a correction of some sort once that happened. And it just happened that they both broke those respective barriers on the same day. I think it was Wednesday of 2 weeks ago. And so, yeah, from that point forward, I've been expecting some kind of a pullback. It pulled back for just weekly for a couple of days and then pushed forward again. Missed that last little push upwards, but then it's corrected hard today. So it's not, from my perspective, it's not unexpected at all, but I think it's just something that happens, and it'll settle out, I think, in the next few days, and then probably consolidate for a while and then start to go back up again. I think this is just a normal correction in a long-term bull market, as far as I'm concerned.
And holding your feet to the fire and crystal gazing, which I promise I'll do for Kit and David as well. Do you think it'll consolidate under 50, at 50, or just above 50?
No, I think it'll consolidate under 50 for a while, and then it'll make another attempt. It may be weeks or a couple of months. Seasonally, April has been the peak for silver, and so I wouldn't be at least a bit surprised if it has perhaps one more attempt at 50 and then really breaking through by April of next year. But that's just my opinion.
Nope, appreciate it very much. And I always appreciate when people are willing to put numbers on because so few people do. So thank you very much, Bob. Kit, I'll throw it to you next. What do you think is the current price action that's going on? Do you think this is a more long-term correction? And where do you think it might consolidate? Or you think it could blow past farther through the end of the year?
Yeah, I agree with Bob. This is very much expected. I think it's a short-term correction. You have to really go back and look at the history. And I was in the business back when the Hunt brothers tried to corner the silver market in the 70s. And I think that's when it set the previous high of right around $49 and change. But so that was over 40 years ago. So this is a breaking through this long-term technical high right at $50, I think is very important, but very different from back in the 70s. And then I think 2010 when it was up in that area. Those were really speculative runs. The Hunt brothers were in the futures market and they came crashing down when they learned the futures market can change the rules anytime they want, and tripled, quadrupled the margin they had to put up. And that was that. I work out of Anchorage quite a bit, and the largest building in downtown Anchorage used to be called the Hunt Building. Now it's the State of Alaska Building. So it's just a lesson that futures can be very dangerous things to play with. So I think it will consolidate to not right below, say the mid 40s to pick a range. And that'll take a little bit of time, but I'm very pleased to see the silver and gold market been very steady uptrend for the last year. Gold for a couple of years, silver for about a year. It didn't happen overnight. It took weeks and months, and that's very encouraging. So I think once it closes and stays above 50, I would certainly see it move to the mid 50s, and after that, off to the horses. Who knows what's going to happen? These are very unusual times. The combination of political turmoil, 2 wars until a week ago, maybe 2 still going forward, all the tariff scares up and down. Look at rare earths. One day they're soaring, the next day they're coming down. But these are all occurring at the same time. And what happens with our Federal Reserve Board is still to be seen. And I think that is something that can really unsettle the financial markets and especially the dollar going forward.
No, makes sense. And David, I'll ask you to jump off mute and just give your perspective on the current silver price. So the lead up over the last week and then today's correction.
Sure. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm in a public place. But yeah, look, I think I don't have any better crystal ball than anyone else. I think one thing that was interesting, and I was just looking at the gold and silver charts earlier today, actually, going back a few years. And when gold first broke into all-time high territory in this cycle, it actually was back in 2020. So 5 years ago. And then there was a year consolidation before it started to go again. And I don't think that the silver and gold necessarily trade in lockstep, but their direction does tend to be the same. In fact, there's an 80% correlation over the long term, the moves in silver and gold. Okay, not the magnitudes are different, but the direction of the move is often the same. And we have been seeing silver outperform gold recently, so that is a good sign that the bull market for precious metals is really on. Finally, after many years where gold was outperforming silver, and I agree with Kit and Bob that somewhere in the mid 40s, like a 10% off the high, 10-15% off the high, does seem to make some sense, and it would be similar to what we saw with gold a few years ago when it consolidated. And then I agree, I think it will go a lot higher. We've never had a precious metals bull market end or top out with silver sitting at an 80 or 90 to 1 ratio. It's never happened. I don't expect it will happen this time, but it should be 50, and likely it'll be even less than that, 40, 30. Even if gold stays where it is, you're probably looking at somewhere between 80 and 120 would be the silver price at a top.
Sure. And
I think gold will actually go higher as again, they move in the same direction. So silver's not going to go to 120 and gold's going to stay at 4,300 or whatever it is. So gold will go up to 5,000 or more, and then silver will go up as well. So I think there's a lot of upside, and I'm very happy to see the pullback in a way because it's very difficult. We have a mining business we're running, and it's very difficult to manage day to day when the price is moving up $1 a day and things are changing so quickly.
That makes sense. And David, I'll stick with you actually for next question, which comes straight out of the chat. Graham asked towards the beginning of the hour, what percentage of this move do you think, actually, if we lost David, I'll throw it to you first, Kit. What percentage of this move do you think is retail and physical buying versus industrial demand? Kit, I'll throw it to you for David.
Oh, okay. I couldn't hear the last part there. Yes, there's a lot of pieces to the silver market. I think the number one thing is it tends to run with gold. It does have a very broad industrial use, and so that has been climbing. That's a big component. But I think the investment in whether it's mining stocks, royalties, the ETFs, all come together. I think that's probably the most important component, but it's tough to say. I think,
Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, go for it, David.
Yeah, sure. Look, my view, and I've studied supply demand of commodities for a long time, my view is that the demand side will basically give you your floor on the price. And because if the price goes down to a certain point, the demand will kick in and start buying it there. And there is strong demand. Like we've had deficits in silver for 5 consecutive years now. Mine supply is not growing. It's another story, but that's what's happening. To support the price there's a pretty strong support on the floor, whatever that may be. I guess we'll see. And then the upside, I agree where Kit was going with this, is the upside is going to be really driven by the investment demand. And we've really just started to see that. It's really in the early innings, I think, of that with silver moving up finally to all-time highs. One of the last commodities to do it in the 2000s.
Romeo, you're on mute.
Of course I am. I'll throw it to you, Bob, for last comments on whether it's industrial or retail.
Yeah, I totally agree with David and what Kit was starting to say as well. That I've been involved in the silver industry for over 20 years now, and I've always maintained that the industrial demand side of things pretty much maintains a floor, but the price really is driven by investors, and that's what we're seeing now. And one of the things, I was looking at the charts yesterday as well, and it's actually quite encouraging to see that the increase in the price has been almost linear for the last little while. We haven't really seen that big blowout peak like we saw in 2011,
Sure,
where things just went parabolic and went straight up for a short period of time, and then of course came straight back down again. We just haven't seen that yet. And what's just happened these last few days, I wouldn't put that in the same ballpark. Yes, it went up maybe 10% or whatever, and has come back down accordingly, but not the way it did then. I just don't think we're there yet. I think we're still in the early innings of this run, and that this correction is just part of the normal course.
No, appreciate that. And Bob, I'll get started with you on my next question, which is, and I hear this all the time from investors. They write in and they're asking about different ways to speculate in commodity, how to take advantage of runs in silver, whether that's in royalty companies or exploration style companies or in producers. So I'm curious if you could talk about the model Pinnacle has and why it's a good way for investors to get involved in silver right now.
Yeah, we're trying to develop a little bit of a niche for ourselves, I guess you could say, in that we're certainly not pure exploration. We're just out looking for a discovery or drilling holes to build a resource. And we're not as far advanced as David and Kuya in terms of advancing into production with a good size sort of flagship project. Where we're at with El Potrero and where we're going with Pinnacle is that it's a bit on the small side, and that was intentional because we want to have something that we could move into production very quickly and get to that position of cash flow and build the company from there. The El Potrero project is really just a first step to doing that, and our intention is to acquire a second and a third project and just build on that. So in a way, we're bridging the gap in some respects. So it's a way for investors to take advantage of these rising precious metal prices, and with the leverage that you get from a junior and the potential that you're going to get from a producer in a very short period of time. And I think we can do that with the project. And we just announced this morning that we've strengthened our team in Mexico and rebuilding the team that I had with Great Panther. And so I think in doing that, we can build things up fairly quickly. And I'd like to see us get to production within 2 years or less.
Yeah, you guys have a lovely, aggressive timeline, which I think is great. And if you do want to hear more about Pinnacle's recent news, we will have an event on Thursday, so stay tuned for the folks in the room. Kit, if you're with us right now, I'm not 100% sure, but if you are, I'd be eager to hear Alaska Silver's model and why people who are looking for leverage to silver should be excited about the opportunity there.
We really have, our model is right now is focused on a very high grade resource at Water Pump Creek. That's the 980 gram per ton silver equivalent, which is really a industry leading. It is polymetallic, so I want to make sure that everybody knows that. We're really reevaluating, looking at not so much the change of the resource, but the gross metal value in the ground, and starting to do some economic models on starting off with a near term production in the small size. The grade is really phenomenal. Right now it's a little over $1,000 a ton gross metal value. And we're looking at using recoveries. NSR is going to be north of $600 a ton. So something like that is our resource is so high grade that there's no reason to change the cutoff. It's really insensitive to grade from that standpoint. The tonnage doesn't change whether you go from our current 200 grams a ton cutoff or to 500. It's 1% change. So that's one thing to look at. The other thing is that we've announced or mentioned in previous interviews, reevaluate the Illinois Creek past producing mine, which is same geologic system. The only difference, it's oxidized, so it's principally gold and silver. But that is a resource that was done at $1,600 gold and $20 silver. So a lot of re-engineering to do with that. Take a look at it, and that's going to provide, I think, quite a bit of leverage on the valuation. But our focus is really grade. Once you have this kind of grade at silver, it's great to be north of $40, but it's still economic at $20. And I think that's the key to safety in this kind of a market.
No, appreciate that. And it is funny how many people I work with, if they have PFSs out, it feels like their prices are from a zillion years ago, and they're actually not that far off. It's just things move very quickly. David, I'll throw it to you. I know you guys are producing at Bethania, you're exploring elsewhere. I'd love if you could jump off mute and give us a rundown of why people should be excited about Kuya if they want leverage to silver.
Yeah, I personally think a great way to get exposure, maybe the best way, is to be in a growing producer, because you get the immediate leverage to the silver price. As silver prices go up, you're not waiting for 3-5 years for a mine to be built. It's already in production. And then on top of that, but you still have the growth that you get from exploration, adding ounces. In our case, we're looking to expand the mine as well in the next few years. So we think we can deliver a lot of growth both on the resource side and the production side at the same, that alone is a good business model with flat metal prices. But if we can do that in rising metal prices, then it's even better. It's almost a perfect storm of upside for investors. So that's really our model. And I think the other really cool thing about Bethania is it's a very special deposit in the sense that it's probably today over 80% of the revenue is weighted to silver. So again, that's extremely rare. I would encourage the listeners to go and look at the revenue mix of their other favorite silver producers, and you'll be surprised at how low it is. In most cases, it's very difficult to find deposits that are more than 40-50% silver, and we have 80% and plus now. So we really give investors unique exposure to silver, and obviously we live and die with the silver price then, and that's a double-edged sword. But I think investors bullish on silver want to own Kuya, and we're willing to take that risk.
Awesome. I'll throw it to a question that came in from the chat, and Kit, I'll throw it to you first. And this is a question I often get in gold events, so it's fun to see it in silver event too. And that's from Barry, and he wants to know, when will the acquisition wave start for producers who are running out of resource? We often hear this in gold events, so I'm curious to hear your perspective on when you think during this cycle real acquisitions are going to start taking place in the silver game.
You've seen the big moves, I think, with Mag Silver is really one of the linchpins in the market, a tremendous resource. So that is, but there aren't any other mag silvers right now. So that was a one-time deal. Peter McGaw, the founder of Mag Silver, is a longtime friend and a very close associate in working on our strategic exploration plan. But that is a phenomenal deposit. So you're really looking, there are very few companies that really focus in the silver market, and that's really the key. So we'll look at that going ahead. Most of the majors now a year ago were really still having constricted financials. With the uptick in prices, they've really cleaned up their balance sheet, and mentioned Core and Hecla as two great examples of that. So as that moves ahead, then they become cash rich, and we'll see what happens after that. Our goal is really to finish de-risking our two projects and go forward in the permitting world. I think right now, with the recognition of the importance of mining in the U.S., that we're in a new world in permitting. We'll see how long this lasts, but I think it's with the trade restrictions imposed by China, that really is a wake-up call for everybody, including the U.S. government and Department of Defense. They really didn't think about this kind of stuff for the last 40 years, which was pretty obvious. The Chinese were definitely thinking about how to corner the market, and they've done it. So it's going to take a few years to recover from that, but you have that combination of permitting and acceleration in permitting and recognition of the true importance of mining. I think will start to change the market.
Great, appreciate that. I'll just say one small correction to the Department of War now, as I've corrected many people on webinars these last 2 weeks. DOD is a little dated, but you're 100% right. Bob, I'll throw it to you for any commentary on when you think mergers are going to happen, whether it's in Mexico where your project is, or just generally throughout the silver space.
I think there's a good chance it would start in Mexico, given that Mexico is the largest silver producer in the world. So there's probably more silver projects there than anywhere else. But having said that, we went through this in the last cycle as well, where people were looking for a lot of the juniors to consolidate. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see that happening, perhaps even next year. I don't know. There are only a few major silver producers, if you want to call them that are really in a position to be taking on additional projects or companies of their own. But it will happen. First Majestic has possibly been the most aggressive in doing that over the last number of years. So I think we'll see that continue. It'll be selective, of course, as it often is. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see that pick up next year.
Great. And David, I'll throw it to you for just any thoughts on, will a wave of acquisitions happen in the near future?
Yeah, look, I think we had a wave already, which was Gatos, Silvercrest, and Mag all were taken over in less than a year. And those are three big plus $billion acquisitions, all one single asset, very nice, large size deposits, all in production. And that really kicked it off. And it's been interesting because I guess there's a couple of things to learn from that. Number one is that we saw Hecla and Core and Pan American bought Mag, both coming back to silver. So those had been companies that had been doing more gold deals in the last cycle, in the last 10 years, and have said, maybe we should get back into silver now. It looks like the place to be. So there was that. First Majestic has always been obviously a big proponent on silver, and they were the third buyer there. And if you look at silver relative to gold, the only major is really Fresnillo, that would be in that kind of market cap plus 10 billion. And then you'd have First Majestic, which is a large mid cap, and then on down from there. I'm talking about companies that have, say, more than 40 or 50% of their weighting in silver. And then you've got some sort of gold silver mix companies like Core, Hecla, et cetera, who are pretty big as well, Pan American. So the space is pretty small, and obviously has gotten smaller actually in the last year with those three big acquisitions happening. And investors have actually fewer options to buy especially on the producer side. So again, that should be good for guys like us. And so as I said, I think the wave is on. There'll probably be months and quarters where nothing happens, and then there'll be a quarter where there'll be 2 or 3 deals. But it's already starting to happen. Another deal that was pretty interesting as well was Endeavor Silver acquiring the Colpa mine in Peru. So they're a company that's been exclusively focused on Mexico for probably 20 years. And they bought a mine in Peru where we are. So we woke up and took notice of that. And that's actually the most recent transaction that's happened in the space, bigger transactions. So they bought it from a private company, so it wasn't a big M&A deal from a public point of view, shareholders getting a premium and all that good stuff, but very interesting M&A deal, and nevertheless.
No, appreciate it. I do want to go back to silver price for a bit, because I know we've talked about all the things that impact it, whether that's wars, whether it's politics, whether it's tariffs, etc. I'm curious, looking to your advice from the three of you on what are black swans that could move the price of silver, shoot it up to $75 an ounce or $100 an ounce, as some people say online, or crash it back to 30. And I'm curious to know, one, what those events might be, but also how is your company braced for either of those scenarios? Kit, I know you already talked about how your project's totally economic at $30 or even $20. So I'll start with you here on what do you think are the events that could shoot it up or down, and how are you braced for those moves?
I guess I'll go to the downside first. I think that with the long, as Bob said, more of a linear uptrend in the silver price for the last couple of years. I think that's the protection that we have for something that would try to take silver down below $30 again. I just don't see that happening. Who knows? On the upside, that's really a tough one. There's so many factors going on. Again, I think it's the investment side is probably the strongest. The solar will be a long-term trend. A lot of that is in Chinese manufacturing, but then you throw tariffs in the mix and who knows what's going to happen there. The things like a short squeeze and stuff like that in the futures market, I think is overblown. The current quotes shortage of silver in London. A few months ago, the shortage was in New York and everything flowed to New York, and now it's going to flow back to London. So I think those are more just talking points and not that real. Yeah, that's really a tough question of what could happen to really make it run up, and the price to the gold to silver ratio, as David said, get back into that 40 to 50 to 1 range. There's still a few mines haven't been in production for 80 years or so, called like the 16 to 1. Silver ratios have really changed in the last couple decades, and something will probably happen to bring them back where they were historically, but I'm not going to venture a guess. I'll turn that over to the rest of the team here.
Yeah, appreciate it. Bob, I'll throw it to you for events that can move us one way or the other, and how Pinnacle's ready for either big shift.
Yeah, likewise, I don't really see much that's going to drive the price down all that far at this point in time. It's just been a really steady rise. And as we've all mentioned, I see it consolidating in this sort of range, maybe mid-40s for a while, and then going back up again. In terms of how high it might go, it brings me back to that old saying, be careful what you wish for, because you have to wonder what kind of a world we're going to be living in if silver gets to 100 or 150 or whatever it might be, and whatever the corresponding price of gold would be at that point as well, because everything is being driven by a lot of the fear and the safe haven aspects to the world that we are living in right now. A lot of central bank buying, concerns about financial stability, both in the US and globally, geopolitical instability. There's a long list of concerns out there right now. And so if things were to get so bad that gold and silver were to suddenly take a run for $5,000 and $75 respectively, yeah, I hate to think what might be driving that. I'm hoping we don't get there in the short term, and this kind of plays out as a longer term trend, and maybe eventually just we blow off a little steam and things settle out over time at higher price levels where we can all benefit. But another thing that I'll throw in there too is just to keep in mind that 75% or so of all the silver produced comes as a byproduct of other mines. Sure. And with so many mines now, or so many metals being declared as critical minerals like copper and so on, silver is a big byproduct of these other mines. And so as other mines come on stream, which they will, although it'll take some time, silver is going to be a net benefit in terms of production, which will help to meet the demand. And so, how that plays out will ultimately have an impact one way or the other on the pricing. But that's something to always keep in the back of your mind as well.
Hey, no, appreciate that. It reminds me of something somebody said at Beaver Creek, which was if gold hit 7,500, be worried about cucumber seeds and ammunition and threat of political violence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fair enough. David, I'll turn it to you for what events you think could shoot us in either direction, and how is Kuya prepared? As a producer, obviously, you're most closely connected to it.
Sure. I'll talk to the downside first, which is that, look, I think to get like a really material correction or basically drop in the silver price, you'd have to have two things happening in the world simultaneously. One would be a really sustained global recession that really just dropped the demand of all things that we need, electronics and whatever. And then also a more of a global abandonment of the environmental cause. There has been, we are seeing that in the U.S. It's not trendy anymore to talk about the environment, but the rest of the world continues on as if nothing's happening, right? They're still building solar panels, generating more energy from solar, and all the other alternative energies that come along with that. But for silver, solar is the most important, of course, because every single solar panel has silver in it. I don't see those things happening. Definitely on the environmental side, I don't see Europe or China going backwards on that. But that's what would need to happen, because that would impact your demand on silver in a material way. If that doesn't happen, then I think we continue to have deficits for many years. And on the upside, look, I look at this differently. I think honestly, like we were already very close to hitting 75. 75 is no big deal. We could be $75 silver in a few weeks or months if things continue on the trajectory they were on. And honestly, the vast majority of people in the world won't even notice. So I think silver is a critical component of a lot of things. Going up to $75 or $100 is not going to change that. It's not going to change anything on the demand side, in my opinion. It's a bit like uranium. You're not going to shut down a nuclear reactor just because the price of uranium goes up, and same thing with silver. So on the demand side, I think it's you could see the silver price push up quite a bit. And I think, again, watch the ratio with gold, because gold, I do agree, if gold goes crazy to the upside, 7,500, 10,000, then you're looking at really severe inflation in the world, sure, which is obviously panicky. People are going to panic on that, and that's not good. But if gold's where it is, 4,000, even going to 5,000 here, just percentage-wise, not that much higher than where it is today. I think silver, as I said earlier in the call, could definitely go into the triple digits.
Sure.
I think if you look at the ratios, you're probably looking at 120, 150, no problem there. And another thing to keep in mind is that about 8 ounces of silver are mined for every ounce of gold. So sure, that's actually your mined ratio. And why gold is so much more valuable is obviously that's a whole other call, but sure, but certainly there's a lot of potential for silver to outperform gold in a precious metals bull market, and we still haven't seen that. And then finally, the other shoe to drop is the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is still relatively strong, sure, given where we are in a commodity cycle. And if you go back to 2011 or the previous precious metals bull market, the U.S. dollar dropped substantially compared to what's been happening this cycle. So there's still a lot of safety in the U.S. dollar, and I think when that changes, then you'll be then we'll really see precious metals go.
Sure, no, appreciate that. Bob, I'm going to change tracks a little bit, and I'll say that from my perspective, capital markets have been increasingly more and more selective with resource companies, even as metal prices have started to move. Feels like people are still treating it like a bear market when it comes to financing. So what specific advantage competitively does Pinnacle have, and it can leverage, whether that's project quality, financial discipline, positioning, et cetera, to attract and retain investor confidence during these recent price moves?
For starters, I agree with you that it's still not, I would say, easy out there, especially for the juniors. That's money always works down the food chain, so to speak, from the seniors down to junior producers, and then from established projects and known companies down to the juniors and smaller projects and so on. So it's we're still just getting to that point where it's getting a little bit easier to raise money. But a couple of ways that we're trying to distinguish ourselves is one being, I suppose, my track record in Mexico, having worked there for 30 years years, having been a co-founder of Great Panther Silver and building that company up into a mid-tier producer, and now coming back into the very same region actually where we started and rebuilding the team with a high-grade gold-silver project that we can fast-track to production. As I mentioned earlier, we're trying to build a kind of a niche for ourselves that does distinguish ourselves from either pure exploration or a larger flagship production that might take years to develop. Our goal really is to try and get to production as quickly as we possibly can, using that local team, that local expertise, that putting back together again, and then building onto that with additional projects, and hoping that each one is going to be larger than the one before. That's really the focus, and trying to do that as quickly as we can. So I think speed is one thing that we've hit the ground running. We've only had this project for 8 months, less than that actually, and I think we've made some pretty solid strides so far. And if we can have this back into production within a 2-year period, I think that would be pretty remarkable. And with the prices that we're seeing now and the grades that we're seeing, I think our potential profit margin could be pretty substantial as well. And then we can continue to build the company that way out of cash flow rather than a lot of dilutive financings that we've all experienced over the last number of years. So I think that's really where we're trying to distinguish ourselves.
No, appreciate that. Kit, I'll throw it to you. How is Alaska Silver distinguishing itself?
One thing we've done this year, and it took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take, but we completed IPO in the U.S. in October 3rd, which was very nice. It took quite a while, so now we're listed on the OTCQX, and that's where we did our IPO, and we're fortunate enough to raise about 14 million US, which is a little under 20 million Canadian. And so that was really a watershed event for the company. That was led by Cantor Fitzgerald, a very well-known firm in New York. So that has really put us in a very strong financial position. We will really take a look at our 2 resources and focus on the de-risking studies, which have been ongoing now for 4 or 5 years, and Water Pump Creek to really be able to increase our drilling production. And so that is really the focus that we'll have going forward. It's a major district. We have lots of targets, and so we just need to focus on really getting the most bang for the buck, at the same time advancing the Illinois Creek gold silver resource, because that was a past producing mine, fully permitted, fully operational. So that could certainly be a fast track forward also. But it's from the capital side, we're very well positioned. We've invested a lot of capital over the years. We own all our own drill rigs, all our own equipment, our camp. We don't lease anything, and so we're very well positioned from doing very cost-efficient exploration development going ahead.
Oh, great. Yeah, you don't hear that very often. David, I'll throw it to you for what's Kuya's real competitive advantage right now in seeking capital from the market?
I think our competitive advantage is that we don't need to seek capital from the markets. We're in production. We should be cash flow positive very soon from the mine. We're well capitalized already going into this fall and into 2026. So we really need to execute now. But whether the silver price is 30 or 40 or 50, we're in very good shape. We've got a great project, and again, we've done all the heavy lifting already. For those who haven't been involved in our stock before, we've saved you several years of pain, because it has been tough. But obviously, it's a good time now. Things should get a lot easier and smoother going forward, with both having a strong balance sheet, and we're still sitting with 10 million in cash, with actually warrants being exercised. So actually, our cash is increasing. And then we're not burning very much, if anything, at the operations now. And then that'll actually turn into a profit situation or a cash flow positive situation in the next few months. So we're in a great position there. I think that's the competitive advantage, full stop. And just to comment on the other part of that question about the market, it definitely, I would say up until a few months ago, it has been treating us like we're still in a bear market. And certainly the retail investors do seem to be really skittish. You're seeing obviously a lot of volume, on any down day, you're seeing a lot of shares getting dumped. We saw that on Friday, seeing it today. But with that being said, there was probably a few $100 million pumped into the junior silver market in July and August and September. That's not bear market activity. a lot of money going into guys who are just raising 20, 30, 40 million dollars to do more drilling kind of thing. So I think not fully bullish off to the races kind of thing, but we are seeing signs that the depths, we're long past the depths of the bear market now.
I appreciate that. And I was having a conversation this morning where it seems like retail and mining always underreacts to great news and price movement and overreacts to corrections. It's just odd to see. I will throw to a question that came in the chat, which I'm actually curious for all of your perspective on. And Kit, I'll start with you here, as you do have that American operation, is how does silver's designation as a critical mineral actually impact sale, operations, permitting? What does that actually materially mean for companies in the silver space?
I love the critical minerals designations, but I think as far as silver goes, I don't see it having that much of an effect. We have our Water Pump Creek deposit is very high grade zinc. It's over 11% zinc, and the zinc minerals sphalerite contains gallium. So we have both gallium and zinc as a critical mineral, and I think those are, from that designation, is probably more important than the silver side. Gallium and minerals like that have been really shut down, the export restrictions by China. All the news has been in rare earths, which is very important. But when you look at many of the other elements, gallium, germanium, antimony is certainly getting a lot of funding from the U.S. government. So I think those are the overall designation in the U.S. of having at least 2 critical minerals, and now I guess 3 with silver joining that, is very important from a permitting standpoint, and from a public realization is that's why it's important to have operating mines in the U.S. correcting the supply chain deficit that is been ongoing for decades now. And gallium is one that we've learned a lot about internally in the last 2 years, since our Water Pump Creek deposit is a higher temperature polymetallic deposit, and that's where you find the gallium. There is no known processing ability in North America to actually produce gallium from sphalerite, from zinc. They've mentioned Gatos being acquired by First Majestic. That is a source of gallium, and all their concentrate is exported to Japan. And so that's where the production of many of these elements happen. It's going to take years to really correct that from a supply chain standpoint.
No, appreciate that perspective, Kit. And Bob and David, I'll throw it to either of you if either of you have any thoughts on what the designation as a critical mineral actually means for companies in the space.
Sure. I got to go, so I'll just answer quickly.
Go for it, yeah.
Obviously, I think it's good for operations in the U.S. We don't have any, at least yet. But I think a lot of countries are going to look at silver as a critical metal going forward. Well done on the U.S. for getting in front of that. I guess I'm not sure if it's become official yet, but that's good. I've talked to the Ontario government about it, and they indicated an openness to it, but it hasn't happened yet, so they're slow. I think some of the other countries in the world, in Asia, et cetera, already recognize silver as critical. So it's already happening, and it's well backed by the uses. In fact, so I think, I'm not sure what games were being played to prevent it from being a critical mineral. It probably should have been like 10 years ago. But anyway, it's good that the U.S. is leading and we're opening up to it now. I think it's going to be good for all of us, but specifically in the U.S., it should help them get permits.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And thanks for joining us today. I know you're in between spots, but really appreciate your perspective on these issues. So always good to have you. Bob, I'll throw it to you for any last thoughts on critical minerals and where silver plays in.
Yeah, I really don't have too much to add, Romeo. I don't think it's going to make a huge amount of difference going forward, other than perhaps in the US from a permitting perspective and maybe funding from the various branches of government for trying to help move projects forward. And to some degree, some of that funding is available for projects outside the US, but there are no primary silver projects in Canada, for example, that I can think of. And I'm not sure how much the US would be willing to fund projects in Mexico. I don't know that it's really going to make that much difference going forward. It's not going to hurt, certainly.
Yeah, not going to hurt. It's good enough. Now, I got one question for each of you, really specific to your projects. And Bob, I might as well start with you, and then Kit will close off the day with my question for you. So Bob, obviously this silver rally has highlighted the value of these high-grade polymetallic assets. Really, my question in summary is what's up next at El Potrero, the silver gold project, the Sierra Madre Belt? What are you doing to secure scalable resources and capitalize on elevated prices? What's up next, basically?
Just at the project itself, one of the things that we've noticed from the work that we've done to date is that the silver grades on surface in places tend to be higher than they are underground. So there may be a bit of vertical zonation in terms of the silver mineralization. So that's something that we're going to need to get a better handle on. But we can probably only do that through detailed drilling, and that's something that we're working on now, is trying to get to that stage of drilling as quickly as possible. But aside from that, we have 4 operating mines surrounding El Potrero within a 35-kilometer radius, and all 4 of those mines are silver polymetallic mines. They're not gold, silver, low sulfidation epithermal. This is the same as El Potrero. So our geology is slightly different than the others, and trying to get a handle on that from a regional perspective is something that we're taking a look at and trying to determine, okay, what's causing that difference? It's obviously something underlying in the geology and perhaps the intrusives that are driving those systems and the source of the fluids and so on. So if there's a way to try and get a better handle on that, that could help us to target not only other parts of our property, but potentially other prospects in the region where we might be able to pick up some silver dominant projects that we could ultimately add on as satellites. And then beyond El Potrero, as I mentioned, we are looking for other acquisitions, and with the prices being as they are, silver is an obvious target. So if we can find a silver dominant project that has great potential, then we're in there.
Awesome. No, fun to hear. And Kit, I'll wrap it up with you today. So the 2025 Water Pump Creek drilling program aimed to grow that 21 million ounce high grade resource that Alaska Silver has. My question really, just to wrap up, is mostly what's up next, but how does the polymetallic potential of the district kind of align with your goals in Alaska Silver to create that long-term value for investors?
That's a very good question. We do have, I think one of the takeaways, I'd like the readers to take a look at our corporate presentation, and a couple of slides in there. What we have is a carbonate replacement deposit. So very different than, say, some traditional Mexican vein silver deposits that are silver and a little bit of gold, or some polymetallic. So this is really a very large carbonate replacement system. One end member is Water Pump Creek, which is the polymetallic, the silver, zinc, and lead. It has no gold and no copper. The other end member, 6 kilometers away, same system as the past producing Illinois Creek mine, which is principally gold, silver, and copper. It doesn't have really very little lead and zinc. So what we've been doing is exploring in between. This is a very large system, 8 kilometers east-west by 6 kilometers north-south. We just announced last week, haven't put any results out yet because they're still pending, but south of our airstrip, the Silver Sage discovery, which very interesting. It'll add a few more elements, sort of a combination of the gold and copper from one end and the lead, zinc, silver from the other. So as we move through the system, the metal zoning changes. So we have the ability to focus on high grade silver at one end, gold and copper and silver at the other end. And only about 20 to 25% of the system has been drilled over the last 20, 30, 40 years. So we have a lot of room to expand to that. And with our capital raise, that'll be the exciting focus next year.
Awesome. Bob, Kit, and David, who had to leave a bit early, thank you so much for all of your insights here today. It's been helpful for the 100 or so or 100 odd people that joined us live. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Appreciate it very much. This will be available for replay in relatively short order. And if you have any questions or you'd like to request a meeting, please do so in either the top right feedback button or in the details in your registration over email. But thank you so much for joining us. I think this was a great conversation. And Bob, Kit, hope you have a great end of your Tuesday.